What's good, YouTube? Thank you for clicking onto this video, and as you can see, it's going to be a book review. And in this video we're going to be covering a whole series, and it's just going to be some of my first thoughts. And the book for you guys today is the series called The Poppy War, if you just look up here. Now, I thoroughly enjoyed this book series. From the first to the third, it had me basically listening the whole time, and that's mainly how I sort of consume my books, is through Audible books. And once I purchased the first book and finished it, I instantly had to get the second one, and then once I finished that one, the third as well. I loved the topics that were touched on and sort of we saw throughout the book. It really hit on some really interesting subjects for me. So some of those, the main ones, is obviously the reality of war. It didn't shy out on that. We got into some very deep subjects, and obviously some things that we all know happen during war as well. And it was a bit hard. It made me grimace at times, but at the same time, that's what I want a book to do, is to make me feel uncomfortable at times and really feel what's going on in this storyline. So definitely the subject matter of actual military work within the book, and also the actual aftermath and reality of war and military lifestyle as well, especially the traumatic and PTSD that we get from some of the characters. That was so interesting throughout the whole book series as well. Like I said, in this one we're just going to sort of be doing a general sort of my thoughts on the whole series, and then also I'm going to be doing individual sort of reviews on each book, I think. But like I said, there's just some of the subjects that are portrayed in this whole review, in this whole book, is so interesting. We have that. The second one, which was super interesting for me, is obviously the opium that was seen throughout the whole entire book, and the morphine and the struggles that some of our main characters and our main protagonist, has to deal with. The addiction, the aftermath, the effects. It was a very interesting subject that was involved in it, and was sort of really well interwoven into how the magic worked and how the magic system sort of played within the world that we have here. And it was, yeah, just really interesting to see how the writer R.F. Kuang was able to interweave that into the storyline, and it matched, and it didn't seem like it was out of nowhere. It sort of all made sense, and it was a really interesting subject matter to sort of play throughout the book. And because of that subject matter, it really reminded me of the Opium Wars, you know, that actually happened through history. I've got a very sort of similar feeling of this is sort of how it could have been and how it might have felt in real life in that situation in the actual Opium Wars. So I definitely think that the writer R.F. Kuang drew inspiration from there. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't looked at anyone else's reviews or anything like that. Like I said, these are all just sort of my first thoughts. Just wanted to sort of jump on and have a quick chat about this book series. So yeah, I definitely think that was a very interesting place that he pulled from, and I think you guys would really enjoy that sort of subject matter as well. So I couldn't recommend the book enough. The Poppy Wars, the whole series. That was another thing. And then, like I said, the fantasy element that was sort of put into the book, the magic system itself, the rules were quite simple. There was obviously repercussions to the abilities that it got. The whole sort of it didn't break any rules. It seemed like the book laid down these rules as this is what happens if you do this, and those rules within the book that were sort of laid, the laws and the rules all seemed to stay. They didn't. At no point did I go, oh, that seemed like you sort of pulled that out of nowhere to save X character or anything like that. Seemed like the writer had his thought process of how he wanted the magic system to work. and stuck to it, which was very enjoyable as well. There was no like there was some big surprises, you know, especially at the end of the first book. But you know, try not to spoil anything. Just like I said, some of my first thoughts. So I really enjoyed the magic system that the whole book had. It seemed like it flowed really well. And then I liked throughout the whole series the arc that the protagonist went, and the characters that we got introduced in the first book quite stayed very relevant throughout the books, and we had those other side characters and those other side arcs also being built upon, and those relationships all being made, and they all the side characters, well, a lot of the side characters of the world did seem like they had their own story arc and could come to the front at times and carry certain scenes, which I really enjoyed as well. So the whole premise of the book was very interesting. It's something that I think you guys would really enjoy. Like I said, it's got that fantasy element, it's got sort of the military aspect to it, and also just many other components to it as well. And the writing itself and the book seemed amazing to me. So the very first book is obviously the Poppy Wars, and this really laid down the foundations of the book and sort of where we were going. We got lots of introductions into characters that would come later on in the book, and it seemed like to me that there was a lot of foreshadowing and a lot of the groundwork for the series made out here. And the writer R.F. Kuang done such an amazing job doing this, and it really laid down those foundations. I could see where we were sort of going. There was still quite a few twists and turns throughout the book, but it really foreshadowed things, and I'm looking forward to basically rereading or re-listening to this whole series and then doing an individual breakdown of each book. The second book was not as enjoyable as the first. I still really enjoyed it. Actually, no, tell a lie. I think it was the third one I didn't think it was good. I think the second one I actually finished it in about 2 days. I was thoroughly enjoyed with that. So the second one actually was really enjoyable. I think it was my favourite out of all three, which I think might be a bit controversial because it's not normally like that. But yeah, I think the work that we done in that third book with our protagonists, being led up to the third book, was really interesting. We sort of diverted from some of the things that were going in the first book and really took on this sort of main path for our protagonist, which was, I really enjoyed that second book, thoroughly enjoyed it. Then the third book was the obviously resolution to the story, and I actually quite liked the ending of the story as well. Like I said, I am going to go over all 3 books properly, sort of go into detail. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think you guys would as well. All 3 books were enjoyable to listen to. I didn't want to put them down. We have some really good characters in there. So obviously we had our main protagonist, which is Ren. A female lead protagonist, was amazingly well written, I think. Like I said, the subjects that she sort of has to go through and some of the subject matters that we deal with was very interesting. There's obviously some things I might not have agreed with. The obsession with Alton, I didn't personally like that. I thought it was a bit too much, but Alton was an interesting character as well, and I see why he was sort of there to sort of progress certain parts of Ren's character and Ren's story arc as well. So I see why he was there, but the sort of storyline between Ren, Najar and Kittite was much more enjoyable, and that's why I think I sort of preferred the second book going onwards, because we sort of got that narrative, that sort of pathway of them 3 and the storyline that was sort of set up at the beginning of the first book playing out here in the second book, and it sort of started paying off this little rivalry that they did have. I feel bad for Kittite. I think he was probably one of my favourite characters. I'm trying to make sure I'm getting the names right. That was, Kittite was my favourite character. That was the best friend of Ren and become, obviously, her link. Najar was obviously, his storyline was very interesting. I'm looking to sort of see if there was any foreshadowing with some information that sort of come out during later parts within the series. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing my re-listen to see if there's any of those foreshadowing things that I could pick up. Najar's storyline with Ren was interesting, but once again, I didn't like the love dynamic that went between them. Personally, I didn't like that. I understood it with Alton more so than with Najar. I thought once she'd gone through the situation with Alton, she wouldn't go through that situation with Najar. But then at the same time, I'm a simp, so I was rooting for Kitite. I think that relationship should have been the one that sort of developed more personally, just because Kitite was always there. But then that person who's always there isn't usually seen as the loved interest. But that's just a personal preference to me. I think that would have been a better storyline. Whereas, yeah, the love interest in the jar, I could understand it at points and I could empathise with it, but there was a point where I would have rathered towards the end that relationship sort of went sour and it moved towards Ren. Is it Ren? Have I been getting her name wrong? I'm sure it's Ren. Ren and Kitite. I think that would have been better for me later on. But the story in general and the subject matters that were brought up, the world building as well, the whole world buildings from the provinces, each of the warlords that were sort of running the provinces, and how those storylines sort of played out, and you could see the political, the actual political aspects within the military as well. So certain warlords not wanting to commit too many forces to certain provinces, certain provinces having rivalries with other provinces, so the warlords don't want to help each other, and they want to make sure that the certain provinces don't get too powerful. All of these political things were also covered within the book, and how that was portrayed was so interesting as well. So I thoroughly enjoyed this little series. Like I said, it's the Poppy Wars series. I recommend all three sort of books. Then, like I said, these are just some of my first thoughts, and I just want to sort of make some kind of video. I don't want it to be too long. We're going to finish it sort of soon. These are just some of my first thoughts within the whole series. I finished all three books. But what I am going to do is a part of this little series. And after this video, there are going to be another 3 videos where I'm going to basically re-listen to the books and really go over what I liked about the writing style of the book, all of the sort of key points that we cover within that book, and possibly the foreshadowing that's going to be coming after, and so on and so forth. So that review will have a lot more sort of spoilers and a lot more information in it, and that's going to be dropping within the next few weeks, and we're going to be covering the first book, so The Poppy Wars. Literally the first book, called The Poppy Wars, is the one that we're going to be covering, and I'm really going to go into sort of the aspects of certain scenes, certain parts, so part 1, part 2, part 3 of the book that I thoroughly enjoyed, the foreshadowing and all the really sort of informations. Now I know this video was a bit all over the place. Like I said, I don't really have a script this time. I don't really sort of have too much. I recently finished the whole series, and I just sort of wanted to jump on here, say you guys that I finished it. These are my first thoughts on what I sort of thought about the book series. Recommend it to you guys. In a few more weeks, we're going to have the first review of the first book up and ready. So if you want to go head over to Amazon, Audible, and purchase the book yourself and sort of listen to it, so that you sort of get an idea of what's going to happen. If you haven't already, then go do that. And yeah, in a few weeks time, we're going to have that first sort of video. But thank you for clicking onto this sort of video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it's something you're going to be looking forward to. If you are, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. But I'm going to catch you in the next video.